crash. I'm expecting a massive crash, and I'm expecting a really, really bad crash, but it's a much different crash than most people expect. You see, a crash, if you think about a crash, what's everybody afraid of? A recession, a market crash. What does that mean? Well, if things crash, let's say what most people think, my retirement portfolio drops, my real estate, my home drops, I lose my job, I get a lower paying job, my business doesn't do as well, I don't make as much money. That's what most people think of. But what does that mean? What all that means is that the quality of my life would go down. The standard of my living goes down. I don't have as much money. So I have to now eat hamburger meat instead of steak. So really what they're saying is a crash means my standard of living goes down. But you see, prices don't have to drop for that to happen. Prices could go up so fast that my pay doesn't keep up and my standard of living also goes down. So it's a reverse crash. And while everybody's expecting a deflationary crash, I'm expecting an inflationary crash. Now, the results are the same. We both have a standard of living that's been reduced. However, I think a reverse crash, an inflationary crash, is actually much worse. And the reason why it's much worse is because on a deflationary crash, at least the market's reset and people get a chance to get back in, right? My kids could eventually buy a house. But in an inflationary crash, you never get another chance. It's just too late. And so I think that's where we're going. Now, will there be crashes? I mean, what is your definition of that? Of course, there's going to be massive volatility along the way, but I don't expect any long sustained depression. You know, maybe we see some sort of flash crashes, sort of like we saw in 2020, that probably last half the time, something like that, not tradable events, because it's going to be volatile along the way. I mean, if you look at the chart of the Weimar inflation, hyperinflation, and I'm sure you've seen it, right, with the red lines overlaid, the volatility was insane. And so we'll have that, but I'm expecting the crash up.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Simply Bitcoin. I'm your host, Optimus Fields, and we got a great show for you guys today. But first, before I go in, shouts out to Mark Moss. I think that clip, and of course, Natalie Brunell as well. I think that clip is highlighting a lot of stuff that us Bitcoiners have been talking about online and in person for a long time. It's this idea, as Lynn Alden was saying, that nothing stops this fiat train. The powers that be, the Federal Reserve, the federal government, the central banks of the world, they are in a rock and a hard place. And there's only a few solutions to this problem, but we all know there's only one solution to that problem, and it is they're going to continue to expand the money supply. They're going to continue to print money. And what that means for everyone else is we may be on the precipice of another crisis. Do we know when it's going to happen? No idea, but we know it is 11th grade math. It is a mathematical certainty that at a certain point, things are going to break. And it's because they're printing so much money. They have to keep injecting more liquidity into the system, into the economy by printing and expanding the money supply. And at some point, things are going to break. So I really like this take from Mark Moss in what this next financial crisis might be. It's not a deflationary one. It might be a hyperinflationary one. And that means everything in the world is going to get more expensive. And maybe in our lifetimes, we're going to be walking around with wheelbarrows of cash to buy our groceries, which is not a future I want to be a part of. Hence why I'm a Bitcoiner and I do everything I can to get as many people into Bitcoin as possible so that we can all protect ourselves individually. This is the goal. But as you can tell, things are getting crazy. Bitcoin is maturing. It's getting all around in the news cycle. It's become a political topic. It's on corporate press every single day. You're starting to see that Bitcoin is entering the mainstream consciousness, and more people are at the very least starting to wake up to the idea that Bitcoin may not just be internet funny money, and it may be something that they want to get a part of. They may want to get some sats because it might be catching on. Anyways, enough of that. Shout out to Mark Moss and Natalie Brunell. We are going to cover this Forbes article that came out yesterday in regards to the Blackrock report that we saw yesterday that we covered on the show. And it's got a very interesting title out here, guys. And for everyone that's been a part of Bitcoin, maybe you think it's kind of clickbaity. Maybe you're saying, oh man, like the corporate press is doing their damnedest to just fear monger. Maybe they're being paid by BlackRock to spread this information, but why would BlackRock even release these reports and educate the masses out there when they're trying to profit off of us. Anyways, the title here is BlackRock reveals it's quietly preparing for a $35 trillion Federal Reserve dollar crisis with Bitcoin predicted to spark a sudden price boom. So absolutely insane that we're seeing this come out from a well-known corporate press site. And I do have a special gift for you guys today. Our guest today is also a contributor on Forbes, so I'm really glad we brought him in today. But before I bring in our guest, I do have what I would think is a bombshell tweet thread from Nick Carter about Chokepoint 2.0. We've been covering it for a long time on the show, and finally we got some new updates on this. And man, it just does not look good for the Biden administration and the powers that be. It really goes into what we've been saying and feeling on this show for a long time, is that the Biden administration has been actively fighting the Bitcoin industry, and now we have the smoking gun, which is absolutely incredible. No longer are we just speculating or have a feeling about this. It is in literally a court deposition that this is the case. So absolutely incredible that we're seeing this right now. And man, it just goes to show that the Bitcoin industry is growing up, and it is terrifying the powers that be. And this is why what we do is so important. This is why getting more people to hold Bitcoin, take Bitcoin into self-custody, hopefully getting more merchant adoptions on board so that we can use Bitcoin like money. This is the goal. This is what we always want to do. And yes, of course, as all that happens, the Bitcoin price will go up, your net worth will go up, your purchasing power will increase, but the revolution is self-custody. Anyways, before I get into the show, guys, of course, like, subscribe, comment, share this content. This is how we get the signal out there so more people understand what is going on in the world and what is going on with their money. Okay. I'm going to bring in my guest co-host today, or my guest for the day, Roger Huang. He's a Forbes contributor, author, speaker, and really, before I go on, Roger, I do want to personally thank you for the epic article that you wrote on Forbes when we did get kicked off of YouTube. And it really, like I was telling you offline, it really blew our mind and humbled us that we were a part of that conversation. And as I told you before the show, you know, the names in that article, and we'll cover it a little bit in the culture today for you guys, the names in that article, and then having little old Simply Bitcoin alongside, we were like, wow, this is incredible. We got to get Roger on the show. So Roger, how are you doing today? How's everything going in your life?
Doing great. Love to be on the show. Love the work here. And yeah, I just, you know, when I wrote that article, I was just like animated by a sense of like, this is so bullshit that, you know, there's so many different corporate powers kind of allayed against Bitcoiners who are trying to produce just content, trying to produce education, things like that. So definitely felt like had to include what was happening with Simply Bitcoin, just along with everything else that had happened. And it was like kind of a very, very interesting week because that was also what happened with the Telegram stuff.
Yeah.
Everything kind of came together. So I mean, look, like, and I'm happy to talk about it a little bit more because I know like people might have different opinions about Forbes and things like that. I can kind of talk a little bit about how the sausage is made there, but just wanted to start off by saying happy to be in the show. It's great to be on here. And yeah, just whenever you have like underdog channels that are trying to create content, trying to create really good content, and they're stifled by the biggest companies in the world, that's when I get interested.
Let's go. Appreciate it. And also, Roger's got the epic swag on as well. We both rock in the Bitcoin propaganda department hat, which recently has become everyone's favorite hat on the show. So, man, I guess we're the few lucky ones out here with the Bitcoin propaganda department hat. I remember at the conference, I like walked up to the Van Eyck booth and I was like, yo, how do I get one of these hats? Like, I need one. I'm a propagandist. This is my hat. And they're like, what do you do? I'm like, I'm part of Simply Bitcoin. And they're like, okay, here you go. So, man, yeah, I'm really hyped on this hat. This hat's great. And also, you know, Free Ross Day One, just fully merched out from Nashville. Love it.
Yeah, I came down to Nashville because I had a book, Would Mao Hold Bitcoin, and that's like on Bitcoin in China, so I spoke about it. But yeah, I had less of a dramatic story with the Van Eyck hat. I mean, they just had it on the table. I think the person was gone from the booth. So
you just stole it. You're like, I need this.
It. Yeah, I'm like, I am Bitcoin propaganda. So
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that was a wild conference as well.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. So yeah, man, in the culture, we're going to talk about what Roger's doing over there, contributing at Forbes. We'll talk about your book. And of course, as you just mentioned, things going on in Bitcoin in China. And then of course, you know, just like being a Bitcoin propagandist and why you got into Bitcoin in the first place. So we'll cover that towards the end of the show, guys. But before I go on, I am not alone. I got my boy, the one and only Brandon Gentili. He's also a Bitcoin propagandist, making content. He's working with the Bitcoin trading card. So, Brandon, how you doing today, bro? Are we going to get an amped up Brandon today? Did you get a workout and you get a pump this morning? Are you going to be super lit today? What's going on with you?
Absolutely. We were just talking offline. That's when you stepped away for a second. We were saying that we got to come in, just roll the show. We can't be sitting in the background in the room, in the green room, because all the good stuff comes out then, you know. So getting hyped up again here, and yeah, I got the pump going this morning, ready to rock and roll. This is incredible times we are a part of. We're gonna look back. People will look back 100 years from now, 200 years from now, and be like, what the heck were these people doing? What was going on? Because it really, to me, it's a modern dark ages, which is flies in the face of conventional wisdom. Like Mark Moss, what he said, even, I think is really fascinating. I would take a little bit of umbrage to what he's saying. Like, I think it's going to be a hyperinflationary crash, but he didn't go far enough with it in the sense. Like, we've already been living through the depression. The last 50 years, you know, WTF happened in 1971, right? Like, this is, I think Nolan actually shared this. It was a poem from a while back talking about the crash we were living through. You know, the divorces through the roof, separated families, illegitimate children, and on and on and on. Drug use, illegal and legal. And just go down the line and look at the last 50 years. We are living through that crash, and everything has been crashing in terms of Bitcoin. It's an invisible crash. So the crash is here. It's happening. It's been happening, and we are living through it. It's the collateral damage that we always talk about, and that's why it's so important what we're doing. We're always looking for this 1929 style crash. And I was one of those people for the last 10, 15 years looking for that. But we are living through it. We've been living through it. And that's the irony in all of it. And I think we're closer to the end of it. But I think it's going to get exponentially crazier as we get really towards the end of it. So buckle up. It's going to be a hell of a ride here moving forward.
Totally. And again, touching on that Mark Moss clip, I think the biggest signal of this is, like Mark Moss said himself, our living standard is lowering. All the products we're using are getting worse and worse. Life is getting more expensive. So you see the signals in your life. But if you don't understand what the mechanisms are and how the system works, then you're probably asleep at the wheel. It really reminds me of the classic memes of like, do fish understand that they're in water? And are we just the boiling frogs in hot water right now, slowly but surely just about to get roasted? I would say Bitcoiners are for the most part, understanding what's going on, but the masses are still asleep at the wheel. And this is why we at least try to get people thinking, plant some ideas of freedom in their minds, and really educate them on the economic system, the financial system, as much as possible. Of course, when you talk about economics, most people tune out. They're like, this is boring, bro. What does this have to do with my life? And it's like, well, do you like the standard of living that you currently have? It could get worse. You probably want to figure out what's going on in the world. Anyways.
Really
Jump in,
quick,
Brandon.
really quick. Really quick, Opti, and Multi-Stacker's got this right. I said illegitimate children. There are no illegitimate children. I'm trying to speak in third grade level here. To me, I think the biggest problem, and I wasn't going to go there, but now I just saw this, and now it just kind of sparked me off here and ticked me off, even that I said it. The biggest fight to me is a spiritual battle. Like, if you don't see this as good versus evil right now, then I don't even know why we're here right now. It's good versus evil, and that's it. It's Satan, which means the enemy, and versus truth, which is God. Period. End of day, end of discussion. We could turn this thing off right now. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. So that's number one. And number two is, what do we have that's truth on earth? So far, the only thing we can kind of see that's truth on earth is Bitcoin. So those two battles, you get those two right. That top, you know, in theologically that, and then what's on earth here in Bitcoin, and that's it. So thank you for calling me out there. That fires me up. So I love it. Let's fucking rock and roll.
I didn't know we were supposed to read the comments. Like, what's the deal with that?
Oh yeah. I should have told you before, but I'll do it live. Roger, the chat is the troll box. They're gonna troll us live if there's anything.
I love it.
If they say anything,
keeping us in the rails.
Exactly. If they say anything that you want to respond, I can pull it up on the stream. So they're part of the show. We interact with them. But yeah, the chat is the live troll box. Anyways, we got to pay the bills here at Simply Bitcoin. And of course, we are going to talk about our lead sponsor, Bitcoin Well. Go to bitcoinwell.com and use promo code Simply Bitcoin or Simply BTC, sorry. And of course, buy real Bitcoin, guys. The reason we love Bitcoin Well in the first place is because they are designed in such a way that they can never rug pull you. It is automatic self-custody. By default, you literally need to have a Bitcoin wallet to sign up to the exchange. So there is never a possibility of you getting rug pulled. Once you buy the Bitcoin, once your payment goes through, you will receive the Bitcoin directly to your cold storage, to your wallet, in your possession. And this is the best way that we think we can ensure that there is no more rug pulls at Bitcoin exchanges. And of course, they are Bitcoin only, guys. We only support Bitcoin only companies. Okay, guys. Also, we are going to do a Bitcoin wishing well today. So once you get into Bitcoin Well, go into the dashboard, hit the my rewards, hit redeem, and then you throw a coin into the wishing well. You get 3 chances when you sign up, and you have a chance to win 1 million sats. So get out your wallets right now. You get 500 sats right now live on the show. On that note, guys, let's get into the show. All right, guys. Of course. Everything we show on our show is to design in a way, it's structured in a way so that you protect yourself as a Bitcoiner. We always talk about self-custody. We always talk about that is the revolution. You need to take your Bitcoin into custody. So do not leave your seed phrase on a piece of paper. Make sure you put it on something titanium, of course, like this. Go to stampseed.com and you can get 15% off if you use the promo code SIMPLY. And yesterday we talked about a special deal going on right now, which if you spend $30 on Stampseed right now for today only, for the next 15 customers, you do receive a special Bitcoin stamp with your kits. I have one here, but you can't really see it. The camera wasn't allowed the zoom to work real good over here. But again, use the promo code SIMPLY. You get 15% off all the products on the show or on the store. And if you spend $30 or more, you're going to get a Stampseed Bitcoin stamp, at least for the next 15 people. So once it's gone, it's gone. So if you've been thinking about it, right now might be the time to get yourself one. All right, guys. Of course, this is called the numbers for a reason. We're over here on Clark Moody's dashboard, and we're going to go over some numbers. So it looks, at least tentatively, at least for the time being, it looks like we might have broken out of the 58K range. I'm sure maybe we will get one last dump this weekend or something. Who knows? But the current Bitcoin price is right now of $62,900, which means the sats per dollar, aka how much Bitcoin you can buy for a single dollar, aka how much the dollar is worth in Bitcoin, is currently at 1,590 sats. Or for the bits maxis in the way back, I haven't heard much from you guys in a while. It's 159 bits. The current block height is 862,139, and the market cap in fiat terms is $1.24 trillion. I think I saw the numbers yesterday that Bitcoin has outgrown, in the recent terms, Saudi Arabia, if I remember correctly. I think we're still right under the silver market cap. So until we break out of, I think, the 65 range, we are still in the running to beat all of the hard money out there. I wouldn't even considered silver hard money, but commodities out there. Anyways, the Bitcoin versus gold market cap is 6.9%. The monetary supply, the Bitcoin monetary supply, I added some new numbers in here that I think make stress our point here in Bitcoin. The total supply of Bitcoin that will ever be released is currently at 19,756,467.99 Bitcoin. That is right. You heard me correctly. Out of the 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be released until 2140, we are currently at 19.7 million, which is a total percentage issued of 94.07%. Okay, guys, so I'm really glad we got Roger here. I do have a couple Forbes articles here before we talk to Roger in the culture. And I'm going to do like a little saga here. And these are all from Billy Bambro, which Roger knows personally. So maybe he can, give insight into how the sausage is made. And the reason I'm giving you this article first, guys, because it really tees up what we're going to see in the BlackRock article that came out yesterday in regards to the BlackRock report that dropped yesterday. So the headline here, this was dropped September 17th. So what's that? Tuesday. Radical Fed bombshell predicted to send crypto prices skyrocketing after Bitcoin suddenly crashes under 60K. Now, I don't know if skyrocketing was the right term, considering that the Bitcoin price did break out of that 58K range after the 50-bit rate cut from the Federal Reserve. They cut 0.5%. It seems like in the short term that the markets are rallying, but remember what Tone Bays was saying, it probably is going to rally in the short term, and then the smart money out there are going to wake up and think, hey, why did the Fed have to cut rates? Does that really mean that the economy is as strong as they're saying? I even was trolling Jay Powell yesterday that he started, was it yesterday? No, it was Wednesday, I believe, when he did his presser. He came out and the first thing he said was the U.S. economy is strong and going well. And yet he cut it by 50 basis points, which, if you really understand the mechanics, is kind of saying that it's not as strong as they say it is. Anyways, I did highlight a couple quotes here. These ones are from Jamie Dimon. So Jamie Dimon says, I would say the worst outcome is stagflation, recession, higher inflation, and I wouldn't take it off the table, which I wanted to highlight considering what Mark Moss was saying in the beginning. And for those that don't know, stagflation is a name given by economists to an economy that's hit by both price spiraling higher and low growth, and is generally believed to be a difficult economic situation to recover from, which we say all the time. There's no stopping the fiat train. But going further, according to Dimon, inflationary forces such as higher deficits that add to the growing U.S. debt of $35 trillion and increased infrastructure spending will pile pressure on the U.S. economy. They're all inflationary, says Jamie Dimon, basically in the short run, the next couple of years. So it's hard to look at it, the economy, the debt, and say, well, no, we're out of the works. And Jamie Dimon says, I don't think so. So, hey, I know Bitcoin is here to make the bankers obsolete here. But if the bankers are telling us that there may be a problem, of course, they're not going to outright be like, yo, there's a problem, panic right now. They can't yell fire in a packed movie theater. They got to slowly but surely give you some signals here, which really goes into a lot of the hate that the Bitcoiners are saying. It's like, why are they telling the peasants what's going on? They want to profit off of us. So what's reading between the lines here? What are they really trying to say? And that gets us into this article that dropped yesterday. Again, this is by Billy Bambro, dropped yesterday, September 19th. And the headline is BlackRock reveals it's quietly preparing for a $35 trillion Federal Reserve dollar crisis with Bitcoin, predicted to spark a sudden price boom. Before I get into some of these quotes, though, I do find it interesting that, and maybe Roger can give us a little more insights, that Billy called this a Federal Reserve dollar crisis. I know you guys don't have too much editing on the back end. I've talked to Mickey, and he's also a contributor. And Billy dropped this and thought it was a good headline, but I do find it interesting that we've always talked about the Overton window shifting, and they're calling it Federal Reserve dollar crisis, which maybe more people out there that are reading Forbes are starting to understand what we understand as Bitcoiners. So let me go into this article a little bit, and then I'll pass it over to Roger. Now, as fears swirl, the U.S. dollar is on, quote, the verge of a total collapse. The world's largest asset manager, BlackRock, has warned of growing concerns, quote, around the spiraling $35 trillion U.S. debt pile that's predicted to drive, quote, institutional interest in Bitcoin. And we've been covering this for a long time. Again, quote, this one's from Eric Balcones, which I kind of reference all the time. This is why some have called Bitcoin the Second Amendment of money. The U.S. debt pile of $35 trillion that's growing at a clip of $1 trillion every 100 days has no end in sight. Again, remember what Mark Moss said in the very beginning. This dynamic appears to be also taking hold in other countries where debt accumulation has been significant. The authors of the BlackRock paper added, in our experience with clients to date, this explains a substantial portion of the recent broadening institutional interest in Bitcoin. And of course, Bitcoiners have been saying for a long time the institutions are coming, the institutions are coming. And I know Bitcoiners are tired of the institutions because it seems like that's all we've been covering this year, whether it's the ETF or BlackRock. But this is where we are in the story. We are entering, I would argue, a new era. I think I saw Kaiser say the sailor era now, where corporations and institutions start to not only FOMO into Bitcoin, but legitimize. I hate using that word legitimize because we don't need the suits to tell us what we're doing is correct. But for the masses out there, when the suits tell us what's going on, that's when they get in. So you Bitcoiners ran Wall Street, as you like to troll me every single day. But I want to remind you, one of the quotes that we got out of the report yesterday from that BlackRock report, and it's key point number 4. Over the long term, Bitcoin's adoption trajectory is likely to be driven by the intensity of concerns over global monetary stability, geopolitical stability, U.S. Fiscal sustainability, and U.S. political stability. This is the inverse of the relationship that is generally attributed to traditional quote-unquote risk assets with respect to such forces. So it really goes to show, guys, we've been saying this for a long time. I said it yesterday. As much as when BlackRock says something about Bitcoin, it makes me weary. I get a little icky feeling. It feels like, there's a chill in the room, and I'm like, oh, well, what are these demons doing over here? What are they trying to do? BlackRock owns all of the world, and now they're getting into Bitcoin, which makes my tinfoil hat radar start to pop off. It really goes to show that what we've been saying for a long time is actually the case. For a long time, Bitcoiners have been pretty much relegated into the corner, saying like, oh, you guys are dumb. You guys don't understand how the economy works. You guys don't know what real economics is. And now, again, I hate using the term, but the smart money is saying what we've been saying for a long time, that there is a problem in the traditional financial system. There is a problem with fiat money, and there's only one solution to this. They have to print more money. There are multiple options, but we know that they're never going to do the other options. And the only option they have is to inject more liquidity, more capital into the system, aka print money out of thin air, start to create more money out of government words, aka fiat, by decree. And this is where we are right now. Hence why we always try to highlight to the audience out there that you need to protect yourself. I know we've been covering politics a lot lately, and it's election season in the US. And there's a lot of heated debates out there, and there's people that think that if we just change the politician, the figurehead, that they're going to be our savior and they're here to save us. I would argue, Nico likes to say two-party system. Well, really, there's more parties, but it's a two-party system that runs it. I like to argue that it's a uniparty system, and it's all the same. It's the left side, left wing, right wing of the same bird. They're all going to do the same thing. They're all going to print more money. So yes, as much as I think Trump will be a better incentive for the Bitcoin industry, at least give us 4 years of cover, and the Kamala administration or the Biden administration has been fighting us, I think it's all irrelevant at a certain point. They're all going to print more money. The only way to protect yourself is by taking Bitcoin into custody, converting some of your wealth, some of your fiat money, some of your assets into Bitcoin, into a system that they cannot control, that is censorship resistant, permissionless, completely outside of the system. And this is how you protect yourself. Do not look for a different politician, a different figurehead to fix your problems. You need to take personal responsibility to fix your problems. And this is how you start to unplug from the fiat matrix. Anyways, I ranted enough. Roger, considering you know how the sausage is made here a little better than I do, what is your thoughts on this topic and the coverage on BlackRock report?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to start off just echoing everything you just said. I mean, I think you can't really rely on like the politicians or the banks. I think Bitcoin is a life raft, and I think everybody's realizing that. I'm just hopeful that, as they get more involved, it's not that they bring their bullshit with them. It's that Bitcoin actually helps maybe give them the life raft that some of them are seeking or something like that. But these are the people who broke the system. I actually got into Bitcoin because I just despise the fact that they were running the world economy. So anyway, just a note on that. In terms of like Forbes itself, as you probably know, and as some people may or may not know, there's a lot of latitude to the individual contributors to write. And so, for example, you choose your own titles, you choose your own kind of content. You can kind of just get everything out there that you want. So when I wrote, I tend to write about, where Bitcoin is useful when it comes to different protests and if there's censorship of people. So that's why, you know, we had the Telegram article, that's what came up. I know Billy, and by I say I know Billy, I mean, I haven't actually really met him per se, but like me and him have been on the roster of Forbes for a pretty long time. We've been on since I think like 2019 or 2018. So there's a lot of people that have joined like after. And I think like shout out to like Frank Corva, like Susie, who are like all doing really good stuff. One of Susie's articles actually got taken down because you couldn't like criticize, I think, like another media outlet. She wrote something about the BBC. So I just want to give a shout out to Susie. She went so hard that the Forbes team decided to take her article down. But yeah, I mean, in terms of that, Billy's got a lot of wide discretion to kind of do. He's got his own newsletter. From being part of the same roster, and what I've observed is that Billy will take like firsthand sources and spread the word to like a lot of people. You know, think about the Forbes audience. The Forbes audience usually doesn't really know about Bitcoin or doesn't really understand Bitcoin that well. So I think what Billy's trying to do is just like get it out there in the most provocative way possible, right? And I've also done that every once in a while. You know, obviously, if you have a title that's like the US dollar is in trouble, which I think it is, right? That's going to grab more attention than anything else. So that's kind of, you know, how the sausage is made there. You know, the editors don't really give us that much, I guess, like just like they do monitor different things. We've got really good editors. But I think that, you know, by and large, you're kind of doing your own thing. There is an incentive to like get as much traffic as possible. One thing I will say is like I write for Forbes and I've written for Bitcoin Mag and I've written for other places. I kind of come at it from like the other way, like i.e. I don't really make my money by writing. But I know, for example, or I suspect, I think Billy is one of the people on the Forbes roster that is making money from it because he's just able to draw so much traffic. So it's been a huge success in terms of traffic and things like that. That definitely works. But yeah, every once in a while, you got to have like those like dramatic headlines. So yeah, that's kind of the a little bit how the sausage is made. He's never really shows up to like any of we have like group meetings and group calls and stuff. I haven't really ever seen him do his thing. So I think he's just kind of like doing his thing. So shout out, Billy, if you ever happen to watch this episode, down to hang out. We've like emailed a few times and stuff like that. But that's the deal with those kind of stories. I also think like, you know, when you're trying to get traffic, you gotta like get those headlines pumping, right?
Hey, you know, we get flack a lot too, considering that we are on YouTube and we want people to click on the show, and they're like, "Man, this is a clickbait title," and you're like, "Yeah, I mean, you clicked on it, and then we give you guys some substance within the show. So once you're in, hopefully you start to think about what's going on and you start to look at your world a little different." So shouts out to Billy. Yeah, maybe he's a little hyperbolic, maybe it is a little clickbaity, but yeah, I think it does stress the point that we constantly talk about is most people are asleep at the wheel and they really don't understand what's going on. And if, you know, bombastic headline like this gets them to click and they start to see things a little differently and realize that, wait, maybe everything isn't exactly how it seems. Maybe I do want some of this Bitcoin. I think it's a benefit to not only the individual out there, but to getting the word out.
Well, you know what we're fighting, right? Like we're fighting like a million Google search results that are just like corporate media, like very, very like staid headlines, like very, very calm headlines, like everything is all right headlines, you know, Economist says this and that. And so it's like, you know, I totally get what Billy's doing. I do it some of the time because in order to just reinforce, like people just don't know these facts, right? Like one out of 3 countries might be in sovereign default. Like the system is not as, you know, the system is crumbling faster than people expect. And in order to convey that, like there's different ways of doing it. But I think Billy's fundamentally like part of the team in that sense. And I mean that broadly, the Bitcoin propaganda team, and just trying to get people to relate to like why there is that need, right?
Love it. Love it. Okay, Brandon, jump in real quickly on the idea of BlackRock making you feel icky, and what's your thoughts on this? Because I do have a big news story here. So don't do a long Brandon rant. Do a short and succinct rant on this topic.
Yeah, I will. I'll be short and sweet here so we can move. But and actually, you guys kind of hit on this. And again, I echo the same thoughts. I'll go a different direction with this a tiny bit. And this is something that we all deal with in the Bitcoin content creating community. We're Bitcoiners. Like we can't stand clickbait. We can't, like, marketing itself is very fiat. Like it's a very fiat thing that's really obviously gone exponential the last 100 years. Ironically, or after the Federal Reserve was created, we have, whether it's Bernays and all this stuff going on. It's a very, very fiat thing. And Bitcoiners are really terrible marketers. Like we just are. And this is something that we have to accept, that, learn from that, kind of play the game a bit, ride the line, whether it's the titles, whether it's the thumbnails, you name it, the articles. We have to break into the normie world somehow, trading cards, content. We have to break into that world. Otherwise, this system will run for 1,000 years on its own. But if no human is using it, it's a human system, then it doesn't matter. So we have to accept that and understand that. And these things are just what Bitcoiners have to accept. You can be idealistic to the grave, but if we don't get the word out and we die with music on our lips, then it doesn't matter. And believe me, I'm like the king of that ship of just being, yay, idealistic, Yahoo, follow me. I'm doing the right thing. I tried to do that as a kid. No one gives a shit. No one cares. Like it's like, oh, cool. Guy over there thinks he's doing the right thing. Okay, next thing. Don't care. So I lived that life for a long time, and it's very humbling. And, and again, like if you're trying to get to the afterlife, and, that's a different story, and that we can have that conversation. But when you're in this world, this human world on Earth, you have to kind of play the game and ride the line and break into what the average person, the culture, pop culture, you've got to break into that market somehow, not losing your morals and your ethics and your values in that process. But there are going to be things where the average Bitcoiner, we look at it and we just cringe, but we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same mission. We're all gearing towards the same thing. And that's what we're trying to do here at the end of the day. We all have a part to play in that.
Love it, Brandon. Love it. Okay, man. Well, I got a bombshell thread for you guys. But again, of course, I'm out here begging for likes and subscribers and stuff. So like this video if you like it. We're playing the game live here. Make sure you share the content. This is the way. This is the way. For the algos. Hashtag for the algos. All right, let's get into the news.
Special shout out to our sponsor, Compass Mining. They make Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone, from beginners to experienced investors. Their turnkey miners gets you online and hashing within 48 hours, making it easier than ever to start your mining journey. Plus, with their active marketplace, you can resell your miner at any time, adding flexibility and value to your investment. Visit their website to access a wealth of resources, learning everything you need to know about Bitcoin mining. Take your first step into the world of Bitcoin mining with confidence. Discover more at compassmining.io. Again, compassmining.io, and see how Compass Mining can power your success. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Foundation. It's self-custody done right. They built a premium grade hardware wallet called Passport right here in the US, and it integrates seamlessly with their free app called Envoy. Passport is fully open source and verifiable. It's the most intuitive Bitcoin wallet design with a UX reminiscent of a classic feature phone, so you'll know how to navigate it and use it the moment you pick it up. It's also air-gapped, meaning Bitcoin stays offline, never touching an internet connection. It's Bitcoin only, open source verifiable, air-gap security model, gorgeous design craft, premium grade materials. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges and into your own hands in just a few minutes with Passport at foundation.xyz/simply. Get peace of mind for your piece of Bitcoin.
All right, boys and girls, make sure you get yourself a beautiful Nokia phone, aka a Passport by Foundation devices. Scan the QR code and use the promo code SIMPLY. All right, guys, we've been covering this for a long time on the show. Nico has been going ballistic on this topic, the Chokepoint 2.0, Operation Chokepoint 2.0, the Biden administration attacking the Bitcoin industry. We covered this when it initially came out last year. And now we got a new update. So what am I talking about? Remember, we covered the article of Nick Carter. So I will do some reading here because this is a jam-packed thread. I'm not going to read all of it, but I will read most of it so that you guys get a good idea of what is going on and why this is so important and why we need to cover this. So again, I'm on Twitter over here, and this is Nick Carter, and he goes, so many of you will remember my reporting around Operation Chokepoint 2.0 from the spring of 2023. TLDR is Biden's financial regulators, namely the Fed, the FDIC, and the OCC, launched a crackdown on banks covering the crypto space. The first casualty was Silvergate Bank, which voluntarily liquidated, in quotes. The common reporting around Silvergate was that they lent the crypto depositors. Those depositors were flighty. When rates rose, they suffered a market-to-market loss on bond portfolios and ended up insolvent. Except that's not true. Silvergate weathered the storm, even though short sellers, cohorts, and members of Congress like Warren encouraged a bank run based on rumors that Silvergate had criminal exposure to FTX. They have since been totally cleared of those allegations. They suffered huge redemptions after FTX, but were still solvent and able to do business. Only there was one problem. The Fed told them that they had to reduce their crypto exposure to only a nominal ancillary part of their business. This is like telling Dunkin' Donuts that they can't sell donuts or coffee. Silvergate was a boutique crypto bank that served the crypto industry. So after the Fed came out with this new informal guidance, their business ceased to exist and they voluntarily liquidated. The bank's assets were also toxic, as it became clear with Silicon Valley Bank and Silvergate that any crypto-related lines of business would not be eligible to be sold according to the OCC. This included SEN and Signet, as well as crypto deposits at those banks. Again, it broke the story in 2023. One point I've endeavored to make is that Silvergate died by murder, not suicide. The critical point is that the Fed told them after the drawdown that they had to cut their crypto deposits to 15% of their book, dooming them. And this is obviously unconstitutional, by the way. In my original reporting, I thought that this was the FDIC, but it was actually the San Francisco Fed that was passing down the guidance, but it had the same effect, killing pro-crypto banks and making crypto firms unable to get banking. And here's a quote. We know now that regulators had verbally guided crypto-friendly banks in November to reduce their exposure to crypto firms to 15% of deposit. Anyways, and the reason for this thread, where'd it go? Oh, here we go. Sorry, guys. It refreshed on me. Where'd it go? Where am I at? Sorry, boys and girls. Here we go. Anyways, the reason for this thread, until now, we haven't had any actual evidence of the scandal at Silvergate beyond statements made by bank executives on background to journalists. Most of my reporting on Operation Chokepoint 2.0 has been corroborated hundreds of times over by folks affected, but the Silvergate stuff has remained a mystery since they have been in wind down mode and have been settling with the SEC and so on. And there's another story here about the settlements, but that's for another day. So what's new now? Oh, man, it's doing it again. So what's new now is that Elaine Hetrick, former chief administrative officer of Silvergate, filed a declaration as part of Silvergate's Chapter 11 filings for the first time. It completely and totally corroborates what I wrote in my reporting, and it's all totally on the record. We have never had a Silvergate executive able to go on the record and tell the real story. With Signature, at least Barney Frank was willing to talk, but because of the litigation and bankruptcy proceedings, Silvergate execs couldn't talk. Hetrick's affidavit is fascinating. She first talks about the infamous Fed, FDIC, OCC joint statement in January 2023. That was the first sign something was wrong. Again, here's a quote. At the time of the first joint statement, Silvergate's bank remaining deposit base was highly concentrated with crypto asset-related depositors, as it has been for several years. Hetrick points out that Silvergate was able to weather the drawdown associated with rate rises and crypto industry balance sheet contractions. They were still solvent when the dust had cleared, and this is the smoking gun. Silvergate was solvent and able to operate, but the Fed had informed them that they had to curtail their crypto business. Without a crypto business, they would have had to reshape their entire firm. It was this that caused them to liquidate. And again, another quote. However, the increased supervisory pressure on Silvergate Bank and other banks focused on servicing crypto asset businesses forced Silvergate Bank to a point where it would have needed to remake its business model away from its focus on crypto asset businesses. She also discusses the signature receivership and points out further evidence of Chokepoint, as I wrote at the time in 2023, coming from the fact that crypto-related bank lines of businesses were not included in the acquisition. Going further, Hetrick is very stark, writing, this public signaling and sudden regulatory shift made clear that at least as of the first quarter of 2023, the federal bank regulatory agencies would not tolerate banks with significant concentrations of digital asset customers, ultimately preventing Silvergate Bank from continuing its digital asset-focused business model. So the Biden bank regulators made it impossible for banks servicing a particular legal industry to operate, and in doing so, they actively caused the collapse of certain banks, namely Silvergate and Signature. These banks did not die by deleting themselves, but by being deleted. I think I already said it once. Anyways, this remains a gigantic scandal, and no one has ever faced any responsibility for it, nor does the press or the public really know the truth. And the Biden admin keeps denying its role in Operation Chokepoint 2.0, even though the evidence is abundantly clear. The $4 billion of deposits held by Signature Bank's digital assets would be transferred directly to its digital banking customers. This public signaling and sudden regulatory shift made clear that at least as of first quarter of 2023, the federal bank regulatory agencies would not tolerate banks with significant concentrations of digital asset customers, ultimately preventing Silvergate Bank from continuing its digital asset-focused business model. Hetrick's testimony is so important because it's direct, on the record, under penalty of perjury, evidence of what we have known all along, but no one has been willing to admit. The Biden administration directly forced Silvergate out of business. They did not delete themselves on their own due to mismanagement or bad trades. They were deleted because the Fed said they weren't allowed to service crypto clients as a bank. And when they liquidated the crypto lines of business like Sen, were tossed in the garbage rather than being allowed to continue to exist. And by the way, what the Biden administration is doing is blatantly illegal. It was covered in Operation Chokepoint 1.0 and has been pointed out that violates the Fifth Amendment. And then he goes on to say that he's fired up and extremely vindicated about this. And we got another quote here from Christopher Calicut, and he goes, the Biden-Harris administration has been illegally forcing the closure of Bitcoin and crypto service bankings. This is disgusting, and they're begging for your vote, promising they're going to change, and they haven't. But even if they had, they don't deserve it with this un-American behavior. And the last point of this, you know, we gotta put a meme here. This Ansel Linder, and he goes, a handful of people brought the whole altcoin and almost all of the Bitcoin banking sector down to its knees. And here we got the architects of Chokepoint 2.0 from the White House executive branch, Bharat Ramamurthy, excuse me, sorry, bro, the SEC, Gary Gensler, Treasury, Nellie Liang, and the FDIC, Martin Gruenberg, and then, of course, Senate, Elizabeth Warren, Sherrod Brown, from the Federal Reserve, Michael Barr, Michael Gibson, and New York State, Adrienne Harris. Anyways, I think this was a bombshell report. Shouts out to Nick Carter for covering this. We've been saying this for a long time. We got a lot of feedback, a lot of pushback from people out there of like, oh, you know, trust us, bro. The Dems are going to fight hard to protect Bitcoin and self-custody. And we're like, look, bro, they could have had the opportunity to do it for the last 4 years. And when you really look at what is going on, they've been actively fighting the industry, trying to kneecap the industry, make sure that the Bitcoin industry doesn't grow, do everything they can to stop the Bitcoin industry. So forgive me if I'm not trusting and going to be like, yeah, let's vote Kamala in and give her another 4 years. Maybe things will change. When, on the other hand, at least Trump is coming out pro Bitcoin. Maybe he's pro shitcoin. It's not perfect, but it seems like a Trump administration is going to give us 4 more years of cover, make sure that the Bitcoin industry isn't actively fought. So I think this was a bombshell thread here from Nick Carter, just covering the fact that we weren't just seeing things. We weren't just making things up. This was actually happening. Now we have a court affidavit on record for risk of perjury that this was happening. So it just goes to show, guys, Chokepoint 2.0 not only was real, but is actively fighting the Bitcoin industry. We have the smoking gun now to prove it. And so, hey, man, you're going to make your decision on who you want to vote, but it just goes to show that the Biden administration has been actively fighting Bitcoin for the last 4 years. Of course, only going to make Bitcoin stronger. But I had to cover this today, considering we always talk about Chokepoint 2.0. We've been living through it, and it's been a rough bear market. But now we're getting some light at the end of the tunnel, and it just goes to show there's some clarity on this situation. So I'm gonna pass it to Roger. Roger, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I've actually talked a lot with different like legislators and people about, is there an Operation Chokepoint 2.0? I asked like point blank, and some people have just said like, I'm not in office anymore. Don't really know, but there are some signs that it's happening. I mean, we got to just like not be naive about that. Like I'm Canadian, so I'm kind of commenting American politics, but like in general, all these politicians are just trying to get elected, trying to get more power for themselves. The Harris administration, or the Biden administration specifically, has been like so anti-Bitcoin, and it's been so stupid to see. Because like, for example, with the Bitcoin mining ban in China, all the Bitcoin miners have come over to the United States. And that's an opportunity right there that the US is just simply not seizing. There's the banks that are being censored, but then also just by and large, like the Biden administration, the SEC, all these different agencies, they don't miss an opportunity, the Department of Justice or anything else, to badmouth Bitcoin. I think Trump has also got his like, I don't know, world liberty shitcoin or whatever it is that's going on there. I do think like, if Trump became president, other countries, including China, would probably actually take a look at that and be like, maybe we fucked up about this whole Bitcoin ban thing. But I also think like, I'm kind of more on the uni-party side when I see this. Like there's no stopping the debt. Like no party will stop the debt. This is all like mandatory. It's all mandatory spend. Most of it health, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. That's not going to change. There's no party that's going to be willing to change that. Also, a lot of the things that, as Bitcoiners we talk about are like embedded. We just like accept as part of almost like society. I mean, Bitcoiners less so, but people are just so used to the idea that like, of course I have to KYC. And of course I have to like do like all this anti-money laundering and stuff like that. And those are specific US laws. Like when those were passed in the 80s, just by the way, like banks actually refused to enforce those because they thought they would be unconstitutional, right? It took a Supreme Court order where there were, I think, 2 or 3 dissenting Supreme Court justices to get KYC AML off the line. And now that's like become a global system of control. So I think that, there's a lot of things that need to be changed. And political leaders are not necessarily going to get there, but there's a big framework and things that Bitcoin can help route around for now or help be a lifeboat around. But ultimately, there's a question of like, how do you change these big fundamental things? It's like a society. Like, can we accept the fact that like in order to just like spend money or do anything, you have to be tracked to like who you are and what you're doing and everything like that? I think it's a very stark choice, and I think that's coming down right now. So yeah, I think there's Operation Chokepoint for sure as well.
Totally. Couldn't agree more, Roger. Brandon, thoughts on this?
Boy, again, I go back to what we were talking about earlier, and good versus evil is going to happen. And to your guys' point, this is whether it's Trump or Kamala, politicians are going to politician at the end of the day. And from our perspective, it looks like Trump, that administration would give us more runway, which at the end of the day will help Bitcoin build. At the same time, though, I don't know. I mean, is acceleration theory the right thing? I mean, people that are attacking you, it puts humans, when you're up against a deadline, what do people do? They get after it, right? We get things done. You look at we just talked about it, I think offline maybe, but the trucker convoy. Same thing, right? It puts people into overdrive and things happen. So at the end of the day, all we can do is educate people and continue doing what we're doing. We all show up here, people in the chat, people running the shows, doing the content, writing articles, all the things that all of us are doing is what you have to continue doing, because we can only do what we can do. We're not God. I can't sit here and move the chess pieces around the chessboard, even though sometimes we feel like we can, and you get disillusioned. I know I do at times. And you just have to keep fighting, because it's the only thing we can do. We're all a little piece in that puzzle, because at the end of the day, does anyone care, right? You look around and that's, does it affect my life? Do I care? And one of you mentioned this earlier too. And again, I don't know if this was offline or at the beginning of the show, but people just generally don't care. If it doesn't affect their life and it doesn't affect them watching Monday Night Football and their fantasy sports and watching the Kardashians, they don't care, and I think we're a little ways away from people truly caring. People aren't hurting that much here in America for all intents and purposes. I mean, you see homeless people on the streets. There are many places I've worked at soup kitchens. My wife has worked at soup kitchens. There's people there turning down meals, being picky about what they're getting. I mean, we live in such an unbelievably abundant time, at least here in America, and you have all the tools you need. Do the 1% or the 10th of 1% need true help? Of course they do, and that's always going to exist. But we live in this time when most of it's entitlement, most of it's self-inflicted. We've done this from the macro, from the top level. We've done that to ourselves, just in a micro. So our humans going to wake up. It's life cycles, and we're going to get kicked in the face, and we are getting kicked in the face. It's this debt problem, right? All these things, as we talked about earlier, the divorces, the broken families. All these things, we're living through this. We continue doing it to ourselves, and we choose not to learn. We choose to continue to think we are the center of the universe. I can build the Tower of Babel. I can do all these things. I can be up to the sky and create anything I want all the time. In many ways, you can, right? You have infinite knowledge technically, and you can do these things, but you have to have some humility. And at the end of the day, there's nuance and there's humility that we as humans have to have, because we aren't, newsflash, we are not the center of the universe. And so many of the problems you see, whether it's this fight between good and evil, and it's people thinking that they are, it's a lot of it's selfishness, right? It's entitlement, selfishness, thinking that we are the centers of the universe and doing things that will affect others in a negative way or whatever it might be. So I don't know. It just, again, this is the thing I've been thinking about. I told you guys offline that it's, we tend to get caught up in headlines and all these different things. But at the end of the day, again, it makes me think of actually, I'm not going to share the story. So we won't do it. Maybe for another time. But anyway, that's the fight we're in. And until we really start realizing that, we will continue to be chasing our tail and have this. Again, the thing I'll leave with this segment here is, why do we continue as human beings? You have thousands of years of history books, all these different things, this knowledge that we have at our disposal. How do we continue to make the same mistakes over and over and over again? I'll leave the listener to answer that on their own.
Let's go, Brandon with an epic rant. We said we were gonna might get a little tinfoil hattie on today's show, but I think Brandon took the cake there. Not to say it was tinfoil hat, but for some people might be outside the Overton window. Anyways, I really do want to jump into the culture and chat with Roger about all the work he's doing. So let's just jump right into that. Of course, guys, we got to pay the bills here. So make sure you go to orangepillowapp.com, stack friends who stack sats. As we are constantly telling you on the show, we have, 2 futures ahead of us. And Roger touched on it earlier. We have one where it looks like we're heading into a digital dystopia, and you probably want to have a lot of like-minded people around you so that you don't get ratted out and get sent to the gulag. So get on the orangepillowapp.com. Make sure you are connecting with other Bitcoiners, getting these relationships off the internet and into meat space. Or there's the other side, the more hopeful, bright orange future side of this, that Bitcoiners will eventually have all the capital and we will be the new financial elite. And therefore, you want to have like-minded people around you so that you can build communities, build businesses, and connect with other people that really get what's going on in the world. So make sure you stack friends who stack sats. Okay, moving on. And first and foremost, Roger, before we plug this, I'm gonna plug this article for you guys. Everyone in the chat right now, make sure you go to Forbes and look up for this article. Give it a read. Telegram and YouTube censorship show Bitcoin and Nostr are critical. And this is why we got Roger on the show in the first place, because after we got deplatformed, there was a hiccup on YouTube, and you guys know the story. We saw this article the next day, and we were blown away just to be named in the context of the Telegram arrest, the crazy censorship going up, RFK Jr.'s epic speech in regards to censorship, and just to have little old Simply Bitcoin a part of that, we were like, man, this is incredible. It's really the timing of everything that happened that probably made it so impactful, and the importance of everything going on. So, Roger, on that note, maybe let's talk about what, you already said it earlier, what you like to focus on, but I do want to give you an on-air thank you for writing this article. Really appreciate it, bro. And yeah, just let's talk about what you do over at Forbes, all the contributions that you have, and what your goal is as a fellow Bitcoin propagandist.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the Bitcoin propaganda train. So I started off writing about Bitcoin in 2014. And my thing right now is about writing about like where Bitcoin is being used and where Bitcoin meets censorship or where, you know, there's like freedom of speech issues or things like that. So people are censored. So they have to use platforms like Nostr. So I believe that Bitcoin and Nostr are the future. We're talking about neutral platforms that nobody can censor, no country can censor. That's like email or anything else. Nobody could ever take down email. Nobody could ever take down the internet. Nobody can ever take down Bitcoin and Nostr. So to me, that's kind of like been a focus. So I wrote this book on Bitcoin in China. It's called Would Mao Hold Bitcoin? And the whole idea of that was just to do research on the most aggressive state enemy of Bitcoin with the most advanced surveillance, you know, where people are being censored, you know, for what they're talking about. People have been jailed for, you know, tweeting about glory to Hong Kong with 40 Twitter followers. I was in Hong Kong during the protests, 2014, 2019, trying to do some underground journalism and actually interview people about, you know, what their thoughts were on Bitcoin and things like that as they were looking to protest. And sad to say that many of those are now in jail. Many of those people, including the Hong Kong 47, who are still in prison to this day. So that's kind of the background, but really what I've been trying to stress lately, and I've been trying to write this not only at Forbes, Bitcoin Mag, you know, the conventional kind of places, but also in different places, you know, like you could call mainstream media, I guess, like Associated Press and all those other things, is that there is this need because, for example, you know, when you have Bitcoin and when you have Nostr, right, you're allowed to just express yourself. You don't have to fear being censored or being surveilled for your financial track. I also highly encourage everyone to, like, if they can, I know sometimes it's hard, but like, you know, if you get on a Start9 or an Umbrel, like run your own node and things like that. Like, this is where it really matters. I write so much about people who are, you know, censored, like Russian dissident organizations that like, they no longer have access to their banking accounts. Like Nigerian protesters were getting shot at and things like that. In Bangladesh, they had the internet got taken down and like 200, 300 people died of the student protesters. And people were like still messaging me about what was going on, even though the internet was gone down, right? So these are the kind of situations when you think about freedom on the line and the tools that you need, the VPNs, the security, the privacy, the ability to be able to transact money and raise funds, even though, you know, state authorities don't like it, the ability to be able to talk to other people about what's going on. Like, this is where Bitcoin and Nostr are so critical. And one of the big things, I know I wrote a book about Bitcoin in China, but I've been trying to tell people through the articles and everywhere else that this isn't just a China thing. I think it's like really easy to be like, oh, China, dystopian, you know, obviously CCP is like running around, there's cameras everywhere. They did to the Uyghurs and everything, terrible. But you know, coming to a place near you, maybe. And that's what I've been trying to stress to people. Like, so like the things that you condemn and like other governments for, we have to be on watch for. There's a trucker protest. They're freezing funds in Telegram with France, right? Like they arrested the founder of a company because they were trying to modify the company's policies to be more in the state's interest. They're trying to take end-to-end encryption down. I've been writing a lot about this. You know, they're trying to stop the ability for people to be able to talk to one another without prying eyes. And they're always going to say like the worst things about it, right? They're going to be like, oh, well, there's child pornography on the internet, so therefore, you know, you can never have end-to-end encryption. The Europeans are trying to put up surveillance on every client-side device. You know, like you log in and it has like image recognition of all your images in order to solve these problems. What it comes down to is this root of like all these different governments, right? They just don't trust people, their people, and they're trying to implement as many tools of surveillance and power as possible. And so even though China is the most aggressive example, and they've gone after, like, I talked to Will of like Damus on Nostr, they banned the Damus app, they banned the relays, right? They like made it so it's like illegal to trade on exchanges. So they are a country that has been the most aggressive about, trying to implement digital surveillance and fight freedom tech tools. But other countries are also watching. And I will say that in some countries, you're seeing like facial recognition being used, cops coming in the United Kingdom and stuff like that. In other countries around the world, there's examples of like Iran, for example, they're automatically withdrawing money and accounts. And one of the things I tell people is during the Hong Kong protests, what ended up happening is they ended up freezing the bank accounts. That was like one of the first things that happened. And so it was almost impossible to raise funds. And so that's the first way they go after you for that. So that's been top of mind for me. I'm always thinking that there's just so much. And I want to tell people, like, for me, it's really important that there's like 100 articles that go over and like try to make it like a mainstream thing. And I saw this with the digital yuan. So I wrote a lot about the digital yuan, which is kind of like the Chinese version of central bank digital currency, probably the most advanced central bank digital currency in the world right now. It's implemented in 29 cities. And I was always like, this is such a negative thing. Like, you're just giving the government directly the ability to be able to control your money, to surveil your money. Originally, when Hal Finney talked about Bitcoin, this is exactly the dystopia that he was hedging against. And it's happening live. And the thing with that is that other countries are watching what China's doing. And even rivals to China, like India and other places, Nigeria, they're thinking of implementing it. And they're implementing it by force. They're forcing people to implement CBDCs because they know people don't actually want it. And in China itself, for example, not that many people are adopting the digital yuan, but you have the Chinese state media. In Nigeria, you have like law enforcement. In China, you have law enforcement that will arrest you for trading, Bitcoin or Tether or anything else. And so the state is right now at this moment where it's trying, every state in the world, I'm trying to say, China just happens to be the most aggressive and the easiest to point to. But your country, the United States, Canada, all these different places, they are trying to take advantage of technology and try to create a system of control and political power that entrenches political structure. I mean, I can almost say forever or endlessly, right? Because if you know how people spend, if you know how people think, that's when you can control people perfectly. So that's just trying to get the word out there. You're going to see some articles from mine. It's more like technical and stuff like that. It's going to be more like, hey, like, here's how OTC desks in Asia work. I'm trying really hard to understand like what's happening with Bitmain and Tether in China, and like, how do Chinese people use Bitcoin? And that's actually also another thing that's really cool. Is like in Nostr and Bitcoin, even though Chinese people have been some of the most surveilled, and one thing I always tell people is like, the Chinese people aren't the state, totally separate. And Chinese people think very differently. And Chinese people, they love to troll. They love to like defy authority in different ways, taking a lot of different risks as well. And you can see some of them on Nostr. They're like part of our community, which is so cool to see. Even though there's a lot of penalties that can be assigned to them, they're going out there. They're trying to learn about Bitcoin. They're trying to learn about Nostr. They're going on Nostr and they're actually like teaching each other how to like get across from a great firewall, get across from like censorship. They're teaching people like you can download apps directly from the APK, the Android package thing, because basically in China, Apple, all these big tech companies, they always put on this like moral face. And I always had a big problem with Google. That's why I had no problem going hard on Google in that article, because they are there to make money and they are there to collaborate with the state. That's just like the end of that discussion. And Apple and Google have always collaborated with the Chinese state to a certain degree. Google had this project where they tried to create a censored version of search engine, and Apple has taken down like I think 1,000 apps because the Chinese government has asked it to do that, right? So these big countries are used to like regulating these different companies, right? And these companies are just trying to make money. I don't want to be like, like maybe this is a bad metaphor, but you know how the Joker says like you need a better class of criminal or something like that? You need a better class of money. You need a better class of like, you can't just have these like big tech companies that are literally their only ideals are to make money and defer to state power. Just ridiculous, right? You see this everywhere with like X, like state accounts. And I mean, it's gotten a little bit better because Elon's like fought back on some governments. He hasn't fought back on others though. Like Turkey, for example, censored some things on his behalf. But when you talk about companies and you talk about people making money, that's just so easy to put pressure on. And that's the beauty of Bitcoin and Nostr. There is no CEO of Nostr. There is no CEO of Bitcoin. So countries can't co-opt it. And so it frustrates them or it confuses them. And then when you have bottoms up demand from people like us, from people in the community and across the world, that's kind of like what fascinates me. And I'll just end off. I think I've been ranting like off my head for like maybe like 20 minutes or something. Maybe the chat's like going crazy, but I'm just going to end off with like 2 takeaways, hopefully. Like one is like, you know, the fight is here. Like it's not anywhere else. Like it's not like this far away country. Oh, like China's such a dystopia. It's a digital dystopia. Like some of these measures, other countries are learning from China because the nation state just wants to grab as much power. The political class wants to grab as much power as possible. Economic elites want to understand. They want to use the internet as a way to control people and control what they spend and control their habits. And I think this is also some of these things you mentioned, you know, the divorces and everything in terms of society is because of this, right? It's just this eternal wheelhouse of spending money and trying to enrich the elite. I think Bitcoin and Nostr offers a way to get out of that. But I want people to know like that fight is here. It's not like some far away thing. It's here and you all are fighting that fight. And the second takeaway I'd have is like, you know, what's really cool is that I spent a lot of time writing about China, the Chinese Bitcoin scene. I was like, you know, did a lot of research. I interviewed some of the OGs. I've been part of some of the Twitter spaces. And yeah, there's a lot of shitcoinery that happens, I'm not gonna lie. But it is really cool to see that global community. And you like the more that Bitcoiners realize, like, you know, we all have some of the same principles, some of the same ideals for how we want the internet to go, how we want to control our own spending, how we want to control our own decisions. You know, together we're stronger. And I just want to encourage people to not just like, you know, get to know other Bitcoiners and other places around the world. Because we're kind of like in all these different countries and living in all these different situations, but we're kind of building ourselves, our own community and our own nation. So just, yeah, putting it out there. So hopefully that's my 20-minute rant.
Let's go. No, Roger, that was great. That was great. A lot to take away from that I think it's a message that we do need to get across to people, the urgency of what is actually happening, because it is happening behind the scenes. And if you're not paying attention, you're not really understanding what's happening. And I think you laid it out great in that rant. But there is one more thing. We are getting kind of to the top of the show. But before the show, we did kind of talk about what is going on in not only Bitcoin in America, but the response or the game theory we're seeing coming out from other nation states because Trump came out being pro-Bitcoin. And I think you have a good insight of what is happening, say, in China or anywhere around the world since this whole pro-Bitcoin stance is happening. So let's do a little rip on what your thoughts are on this and the importance of this happening right now and where we are in the story.
Sure. Yeah, I wrote an article about it on Forbes. It's like the China price bump thing. Like the short of it is like, I don't think China is going to unban and turn away from CBDCs or central bank digital currencies. But like, for example, there was a Hong Kong professor that wrote like banning Bitcoin mining was like a terrible mistake because now all the tax revenue that could have gone to like the Chinese government, local governments, especially they're struggling, is now going to the United States. And one thing that I should tell people, forget the Chinese state, like the Chinese economy is suffering. It might have the lowest growth since 1976, which is when Mao died. And so Chinese people are looking for a life raft, and a lot of them are finding it in Bitcoin. And so that's just something to think about as well. So forget the state for a while. But I do think if Trump gets elected, I think that you know, the Chinese party state's number one priority and other countries' priority as well. They probably have like 20 or 30 people, maybe 1,000 or 10,000 people monitoring what Trump says and does and just trying to make sense of it. Like at any given time, it is the number one foreign policy kind of directive for the Chinese party state is to understand how a U.S. president might act on any number of different issues. And so now they're seeing him like go to PubKey. You know, I was gonna make a joke because I spoke at PubKey actually a week before. I was like, I wonder how many Chinese intelligence agents were like, if it was much more, or if it was like much less, or like, I don't know. Maybe I like to think that there's maybe 1 or 2, you know, Chinese intelligence agents watching, you know, in the background. Like, shout out if so. they are watching, what Trump says, like every little thing he does. So him going to Bubkey is going to be a big deal. They're going to understand that as like, oh wow, like why is he doing that, right? And so I don't know that it's going to necessarily create a lot of change. I think you're going to see like some other countries. I think it's like if you get like a bunch of countries at once to be like, hey, the States is embracing this, so it's cool. So you might think of like an Argentina, right? You might think an Argentina that's kind of like, a little bit, although they're a little bit more like ETH shitcoin friendly, but like, now they're looking at, well, the States is doing this, so maybe this is like kind of like a smart play, right? We want to align with the States when it comes to that. Malay has been like really big on like aligning with the States. I think he's also got some favoritism with like Trump. If you had like some other countries that are kind of taking a look, it might be like countries like Paraguay, where there's a lot of Bitcoin mining happening right now. They're really aligned with the US. And so they really do watch what the US does. And if you have a pro Bitcoin president, one thing I know is, or I've heard, is that just because Trump has been making these positions, people in the American policymaking kind of apparatus have been a little bit more tentative. They might have attacked Bitcoin a little bit more fully, but you see like Harris has to at least pay lip service to all this stuff, right? I personally think it's a little bit bullshit, but like at least she has to pay lip service to not, which is still like a step, right? But the thing with all that is like all these countries that are kind of on the edge, they're going to start taking a look. So they might start saying like, hey, instead of letting Bitcoin miners take our power for Paraguay, we might just try to mine like Bhutan and try to get a reserve. Or we might try to legalize, Bitcoin in this. There's also like Maya, who's running for president, like Suriname. So like there's like these like bottoms up Bitcoiners who are running for politics, which is kind of interesting as well. And then there's like the top down where nation states are kind of taking a look. If the United States takes a position on this, especially a strongly positive one, I think you're going to see a bunch of nation states take on different positions. And I think what you're going to start seeing from China is probably signs that they think like, maybe we need to experiment, especially with Hong Kong, which has the spot Bitcoin ETF and all those other things. Not the biggest fan of the spot Bitcoin ETFs, by the way, but that is kind of like an experimental ground they're trying there. And so I think you're going to see some of that discourse. And so you're probably going to see some favorable headlines from China. Also, like, I don't really think like China, like that was also like, I mean, that's like a meme as well, right? Like how many more times can China ban Bitcoin? They can go after people. They haven't done that yet. They haven't like, they say like holding Bitcoin is still legal. They can still like do a really draconian thing and try to figure out if you've ever had Bitcoin in your life and like just snatch you up and like seize your Bitcoin. Like they could be doing that. So there could be more of the China bans Bitcoin meme. They did that in Xinjiang actually to the Uyghurs. They just said like legitimately Bitcoin is like forbidden for all Uyghurs, which is kind of also really dystopian. But that hasn't happened yet. But like, yeah, so I think you're going to start seeing like more favorable headlines from China.
Love it, Roger. Love it. Well, great insights here. But we are running a little long, guys. So forgive me, but I am going to ask Roger to do what is your last 2 sats for the audience? What's the final message you want to leave with everyone watching the show?
Yeah, I'm sorry about the memes, I guess. I'm just looking at the chat.
It's my fault. It's my fault. I'll take the licks for that one. So don't apologize. I'll deal with it.
Our RIP memes are just like, ranting my head off. No, I mean, just like 2 takeaways. Like one is just like, you don't think it, like even these small things, just like being part of the community, like, you all are saying like, you were being humbled. Like Simply Bitcoin is proud of creating Bitcoin content. And that's really hard in a world that is like against Bitcoin content. I can't stress enough, having written for a lot of different sources. It's not necessarily like super malicious or something, but there's so many people against Bitcoin in the writing and the news scene. So to have people on there, that's so important. And why don't we just do the takeaways out there? Free the Hong Kong 47, free Ross Day 1, free all the political prisoners out there, keep Bitcoin strong. Use Nostr if you're not on there already. Try out the Lightning Network. Get on Lightning nodes. Let's fucking go.
Let's go. All right. Before I move on, Roger, where can people find you? People like your rants. So where do you want to direct everyone to? And then we'll wrap up today's show.
I see Terrence Yang is in the audience. So shout out to Terrence Yang.
Let's go.
Let's go. Let's go. But yeah, you can find me on let's say Nostr first, like Loki at nostr-verified.com. And I saw Simply Bitcoin's coming onto Nostr, so like
Yeah, we're on Zap Streams right now.
Yeah, that's where we go. So I'm trying to amplify that right now. X is also okay too. Like Roger H 1991. Unfortunately, I fucked that up. I put my birth year there, so like I dox myself. But people go, like, all right, you can follow me on both, and yeah, that's and the book is, Would Mal Hold Bitcoin? That's kind of like around, and you can pay in sats, or I'm actually like doing a physical tour. So if any of y'all are in like London or Calgary or other different places, I'll holla. If you follow me, you'll find me in those places. So hopefully we can like interact in person, and I can be even more out of pocket than I am here. But we didn't talk about, when I was at PubKey, I was talking about like the meth culture in China and like how like
wow,
picking meth and stuff.
All right,
So.
well, hey, we are on YouTube. We are on YouTube here. YouTube here.
But that's all. Yeah, but I can't get you all like strucken down or something.
Yeah, not again. You can't write an article about us and then nuke us.
I help with the uncensorship. I can't.
He needs more content.
For the censorship, man. I mean,
oh man, love it, Roger. Well, man, really appreciate you coming on. I'm gonna pull you back, scene, hang out for a moment while I wrap up the show. But really appreciate you coming on. I think you have some great signals. So appreciate you again for, I think, the third time. I thank you. Appreciate you for the article, but man, kudos to you for everything you're doing. We are in the trenches as the Bitcoin propaganda department. Let's go. All right, Roger. Let me pull you behind the scenes. Brandon, thank you for co-hosting with me. I'm going to do it the same thing for you. Since I did have to, minimize stuff, there's a lot of stuff here. I'm going to give you the last 2 sats. What's the last message you want to leave with the audience? And then we'll wrap up today's show.
Yeah, it's been an incredible show. And we need people like Roger. And again, I would say that probably all the people here watching, everyone, same boat, right? And we're here for a reason. That calling, that pull inside you, in your heart, you feel it. We all feel it, and that's why we're here. If you ever question why you're on Earth, that is why. I would just say, again, Bitcoin and Nostr, Roger just talked about those. We have the greatest tools. Social media, everyone looks at it in a negative light. It's really positive, right? All these things we know about these things now because of Bitcoin and Nostr and social media and just in general and technology. We live in the greatest time in the world. And because we have the ability to do things we never could before, not going to space, right? It's knowing the things that are going on around the world. We don't need to involve ourselves in every single little thing, but it gives us the awareness, as Roger said, hey, a foreshadowing of what's coming. This is going on over here. I got to stand on guard for what might be happening over here. So we have that now. We have that ability, and we're seeing that. And that's why there's so much dissension. That's why the elites, I shouldn't say elite, sorry. The ruling class is having such a hard problem and clamping down so much because they're at the end of the rope. It's done. The ticker is running down and there's not much time left for them. And the people are now taking over. And someone was mentioning the Declaration of Independence in the chat. And boy, is that a phenomenal document. And if you haven't read it, I would go read it. It's only a few pages. I just read it 2 months ago to the kids for their nighttime for Independence Week here in America. I read it to them. That was the most recent time I've read it. And boy, is it just every person should be reading it once or twice a year, wherever you are in the world. Bitcoin finally gives us the ability to have those ideals cemented, in the ether, basically, and give you that independence wherever you are in the world. Because before the Constitution Declaration were really, you only had to be inside the borders of America or maybe on an embassy somewhere, U.S. ground. Now we have that ability to do that everywhere, and that's the beautiful thing. So the information getting out, we have the most highly regarded people in the world in Bitcoin, and that's what gives me the most hope. We are absolutely winning, and price is just a reflection of the education, where we're at right now. All the things that are going in the background, the hash rate going up, the fundamentals never been stronger. That continues to climb everywhere. So the price will reflect that over time. And that ultimately is that reflection of education and people starting to wake up. But we still have some time. There's going to be crazier and crazier things to happen. Again, we are the 3%. Don't expect everyone to get this, because they're not. And I spent much of my life thinking, oh, this is obvious. These things, 2 + 2 is 4. Everyone will get this. No. Only 3% of us will understand it, will get it. Coming full circle to the Constitution or to the Declaration of Independence, there's only a few people that get it. Don't expect the other 97% to get it. We just need to drag them along as much as we humanly can and the higher authorities, God, the spirits, the human nature or Mother Nature will take care of the rest. So that's my message on this Friday. I know we didn't get the meme review, but boy, I could not be more hopeful for where we're headed.
Let's go. Wow. Well, I just realized I haven't been doing the horn much, but we got a few horns in here today. All right, Brandon, really appreciate it, man. Go follow Brandon on Twitter, Brandon_Gentili. And man, appreciate you coming off the bench. I'm going to pull you behind the scenes, guys. I know. I didn't do the memes, but if I did the memes, we'd be here for like 2 hours. So I got to cut the show short. It's already long and it's a Friday show. So hopefully people watch the whole show. That's the point. I want you guys to watch the whole show. Make sure we jam pack as much signal in the show as possible, as much substance in the show as possible. Once you get in, once you click the clickbait title, at least you get some signal here and you realize what's going on. This is the goal of Simply Bitcoin. I know, throw your tomatoes. I'm hearing all the criticisms, but hey, it is what it is. We got to play the game and we got to spread the Bitcoin adoption. So we love you guys. We appreciate you guys. Of course, smash the like, subscribe, share this, clip it, all that good stuff. Comment. We appreciate all the feedback, and we're trying to give you guys the best show possible. On that note, it is Friday. I know no memes, but get outside, touch some grass, get a workout in, eat some good food, call your loved ones. Make sure you are not dropping the ball on what it means to be a good human. Because yes, you can argue on the internet. Yes, you can propagandize Bitcoin, but you also got to be a good person out there. On that note, guys, we'll be back on Monday with our normally scheduled show. Nico will be back, and we'll continue the show like always. All right, guys, peace out. I will see you on the other side.
By BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.